The Big Thompson Canyon is not a place that welcomes visitors. It merely tolerates them. In the high country of Colorado, the air has a way of thinning out until it feels like you are breathing cold glass. The pine trees stand like silent sentinels, their needles knitting together to choke out the light from above. Down here, in the shadows of the Roosevelt National Forest, reality feels a little less solid than it should. People talk about the missing 411 cases as if they are just statistics on a map. But they are not. They are holes in the world. Jagged tears in the fabric of what we think we understand about nature. On the 2nd of October, 1999, a 3-year-old boy named Jaryd walked into one of those tears. He was there one heartbeat, and then the universe simply folded in on itself, leaving nothing but the sound of the wind. The group he was with were not careless people. They were adults who understood the gravity of the wilderness. They were part of a Christian singles group, looking for nothing more than a quiet afternoon of reflection and fellowship. The trail was well defined, a simple path through the brush and the granite outcrops. Jaryd was a boy full of life, a small burst of blue and tan against the muted grays of the mountain. He was running just a few yards ahead of the adults, his little legs pumping with the pure joy of being outside. The adults could hear the sound of his laughter and the crunch of his sneakers on the dry earth. It was a rhythmic, comforting sound. Then, there was a sudden, sharp silence that seemed to drop over the trail like a heavy blanket. The birds stopped their chatter, and even the river seemed to hush its roar for a single, terrifying second. The group rounded a bend in the trail, expecting to see the boy waiting for them or perhaps hiding behind a tree. But the path ahead was empty, stretching out like a long, accusing finger into the heart of the forest. There were no tracks, no disturbed brush, no sign that a human being had passed that way at all. It was as if the boy had stepped off the edge of the earth and into a place where gravity no longer applied. They called his name, their voices cracking as they realized the silence was not going to answer back. The canyon walls caught the sound of Jaryd's name and tossed it back and forth, distorting it until it sounded like a stranger's plea. Every rock began to look like a crouched figure. Every shadow looked like a doorway into the dark. The air grew colder as the sun dipped behind the peaks, casting long, jagged shadows across the search area. The search and rescue effort that followed was one of the largest in the history of the state. A desperate scramble to find a child in a landscape designed to hide him. Hundreds of volunteers descended on the canyon, their orange vests clashing with the natural hues of the forest. They brought in helicopters that beat the air into a frenzy, their searchlights scanning the ground like the eyes of some prehistoric bird. But the forest remained stubbornly, almost spitefully, quiet. They brought in the bloodhounds, animals trained to find a scent even in the most difficult conditions. But when the dogs reached the spot where Jaryd was last seen, they did something that chilled the marrow of the searchers. They did not bay or strain at their leashes. They simply sat down and whined. Some of them paced in small circles, their hackles raised as if they were looking at something the human eye could not perceive. The investigators looked for any sign of a predator, a mountain lion or a bear that might have snatched the boy in a flash. But there was no blood, no tufts of hair, no evidence of a struggle in the soft dirt of the trail. A mountain lion is a messy killer. It leaves a trail of carnage that is impossible to miss. In this case, there was only the pristine silence of a forest that had swallowed its prize whole. The missing 411 profile is precise, and it is terrifying in its consistency across the globe. We see children taken from the very sight of their parents, often in areas with large boulder fields or granite formations. There is an association with water, and a mysterious absence of tracks that defies logic. Jaryd checked every single box on that grim checklist, as if he had been selected by some unseen hand. For days, the search continued until the weather turned and the first snows of autumn began to coat the peaks in white. The searchers were forced to retreat, leaving the boy behind in the cold, dark heart of the mountain. The case went cold, becoming another entry in the long list of those who go into the woods and never come back. The father, Jaryd Atadero, was left with a hole in his life that no amount of time could ever hope to fill. Imagine the nights in that canyon. The temperature dropping far below freezing as the wind whips through the pines. A child alone in that darkness would not survive more than a few hours without shelter. Yet the searchers found no sign of a camp. No small footprints in the snow. Nothing to indicate a struggle for survival. It was as if Jaryd was no longer in the canyon at all, but somewhere just beyond the reach of our senses. 4 years passed, and the world moved on from the disappearance of the little boy in the blue jacket. The forest continued its slow, patient cycles of growth and decay, hiding its secrets under layers of needles and snow. But the mountains are not good at keeping things buried forever. Eventually, they spit out what they have taken. In June of 2003, 2 hikers were exploring a rugged area high above the original search site. They were nearly 600 feet up a steep, treacherous slope that even experienced climbers would find daunting. It was an area of jagged rock and dense brush, far from any established trail or logical path for a child to take. As they crested a ridge, they saw something that looked out of place against the grey granite. It was a patch of blue, faded by the sun but still recognizable as fabric. As they got closer, their hearts began to sink into their stomachs as they realized what they had found. There was a pair of small sneakers, sitting side by side on a flat rock as if someone had carefully placed them there. Nearby, they found a pair of pants and a jacket, both turned inside out as if they had been peeled off a body. The fabric was weathered, but it was unmistakably the clothing Jaryd had been wearing on the day he vanished. The location was impossible. A 3-year-old boy could not have climbed that height through the thick brush and over the sheer rock faces. To reach that spot from the trail, he would have had to possess the strength and the agility of a mountain goat. Furthermore, the area had been searched by ground crews and from the air during those initial, frantic days in 1999. How could they have missed a bright blue jacket sitting on a grey rock for 4 long years? The most disturbing part was the condition of the items themselves, especially the shoes. They were not scuffed or worn down as you would expect from a child wandering for miles over sharp rocks. The soles were still relatively clean, and the laces were still tied in the way a parent would tie them. It was as if the boy had been transported through the air and placed on that ridge, bypassing the miles of thorns and steep cliffs below. A search of the immediate area revealed a single tooth and a small fragment of a skull, barely enough to fill a man's palm. There were no other bones, no ribs, no femurs. Nothing that would suggest a body had decayed there naturally. It was a fragmented recovery, a jigsaw puzzle with 99% of the pieces missing. The forensic experts were baffled by the lack of animal gnaw marks on the remains that were found. If a mountain lion had taken him to that height, there would have been a trail of clothing and remains stretching up the mountainside. There would have been blood on the rocks and the scent of death hanging in the air for weeks. Instead, it was as if the boy had simply materialized on that high ridge, years after the searchers had scoured the ground below. It defies every law of biology and physics that we hold dear, and points toward a reality we are not prepared to face. The clothing being inside out is a detail that appears in many missing 411 recoveries, a chilling and inexplicable commonality. Some suggest it is the result of terminal burrowing or paradoxical undressing, but those are behaviors associated with hypothermia. Jaryd vanished in the middle of a warm afternoon, long before the cold could have set in. Why would he remove his clothes and turn them inside out before being placed on a high mountain ridge? This is the hallmark of the missing 411 phenomenon. The impossible location combined with the impossible condition of the evidence. We see it time and time again. Victims found in areas that were previously searched, or at elevations that should be unreachable for them. It suggests a force that does not move through space the way we do. Something that can fold the map and step from one point to another in an instant. It is a predatory geometry, a shifting of the landscape that we are not meant to see. There is a theory that certain parts of our world are thinner than others, places where the veil between dimensions is worn to a thread. In these places, a person can step behind a tree and find themselves in a version of the forest that is not our own. They wander through a silent, grey landscape until the forest decides to let them back in. Often miles away and years too late. It is a terrifying thought that the ground beneath our feet is not as solid as it seems. that the trees are more than just wood and leaf. The spatial fold is not just a theory to those who have felt the air change in the deep woods. It is a lived reality. They speak of the Oz effect, where all sound vanishes and the world takes on a static, high contrast quality. It is in these moments that the folding occurs. A momentary glitch in the matrix of our physical existence. If Jaryd stepped into such a fold, he could have been miles away before the adults even realized he was gone. The disappearance of Jaryd Atadero is a grim reminder that we are not the masters of the wilderness. We are merely guests. There are things in the deep woods that do not have names. Things that watch from the shadows with eyes that do not blink. They do not hunt for food. They hunt for something else. Something we cannot understand. When they take someone, they do not just take a life. They take the very memory of how the world is supposed to work. We see a similar pattern in the case of young Dior Kunz Jr., who vanished from a remote campsite in Idaho back in 2015. Just like Jaryd, he was there 1 second and gone the next. Despite being surrounded by adults who were watching him closely. No scent for the dogs. No tracks in the dirt. No evidence of a struggle or a predator. It is the same shadow, moving from state to state, taking what it wants and leaving only questions behind in the dust. The parallels between these cases are too numerous to be mere coincidence. They point toward a singular, predatory intelligence. It targets the most vulnerable among us. The children who have not yet learned to fear the deep shadows of the forest. And it does so with a precision that suggests it knows exactly when we are looking away. It is a calculated theft, a removal of a human soul from the board of our existence. I often think about that high ridge in the Roosevelt National Forest and the silence that must have hung over those shoes for 4 long years. I think about the wind howling through the canyon, carrying the echoes of a name that no one would ever answer. We like to believe that if we follow the trail and stay with the group, we are safe. But the forest has its own rules. And sometimes it decides to change them without warning or mercy. When you go into the woods, listen to the birds and the wind in the trees, but pay attention to the moments when they stop. If the air grows heavy and the world seems to go still, do not look back. And do not run ahead. Just keep your eyes on the path and hope that you are not the one the mountain has chosen to keep for its own. Because once you step into the fold, there is no guarantee that you will ever find your way back out to the world, you know? The case of Jaryd Atadero remains one of the most chilling examples of the missing 411 mystery. A story with no happy ending and no easy answers. It serves as a warning to all of us who seek solace in the wild places of the world. The mountains are beautiful. Yes. But they are also ancient and hungry. And they do not share their secrets with the living. They have all the time in the universe to wait for you to make a single, fatal mistake. As we peel back the layers of these disappearances, we find ourselves staring into a void that stares back with cold, indifferent eyes. We want to believe in a world that is logical and fair. A world where children do not vanish into thin air. But the reality of the missing 411 is that we are living on the edge of a great, dark ocean. And we have no idea what is swimming in the depths. Every hike, every camping trip, is a gamble with forces we cannot even begin to comprehend. So, the next time you are out on the trail, and you feel a chill that has nothing to do with the weather, remember the boy in the blue jacket. Remember the shoes sitting on the rock, miles away from where they should have been, as clean as the day they were bought. The wilderness is not our friend. It is a vast, indifferent entity that does not care about our laws or our logic or our grief. Stay on the path. Hold on to your loved ones. And never, ever, let them out of your sight for even a second. The shadows are growing long now, and the sun is dipping below the horizon, bleeding out across the peaks like an open wound. It is time to leave the canyon and head back to the safety of the lights and the noise of the city where the rules still apply. But the forest is still there, breathing in the dark, waiting for the next season to begin and the next traveler to wander off the path. The mystery of the missing remains unsolved, a dark stitch in the history of the great outdoors. The final image of this case is not the skull fragment or the faded blue jacket, but the empty trail that leads to nowhere. It is the image of a father standing in the middle of a path, calling the name of a son who is no longer in this world, or perhaps in any world we know. It is the ultimate horror. The horror of the void that consumes without leaving a trace. And it is a horror that is repeated every time someone vanishes into the thin air of the high country, leaving nothing but a silence that lasts forever. We must accept that there are places in this world that are not for us. Places where the laws of man and nature are suspended. We call them national forests. But they are really the last strongholds of something far older and far more dangerous than we can imagine. If you value your life and the lives of those you love, respect the silence and the shadows. For once, the mountain decides to take you. There is no force on earth that can bring you back. Good night. And keep your eyes on the tree line, for the trees are watching you, and they do not forget a face. The stars are cold. The wind is rising, and the canyon is waiting for its next story. May you always find your way back to the light, and may you never have to know the true meaning of the word missing. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and stay on the trail. The big Thompson River continues to flow, oblivious to the tragedies that have played out on its banks. It washes away the footprints and the memories, leaving only the cold, hard stones behind. But for those of us who know the story of Jaryd Atadero, the river's song will always have a different tone. It is a song of loss, a song of mystery, and a song of the things that hide in the fold. We leave the canyon now, the darkness closing in behind us like a vault door. The headlights of the car cut through the gloom, a fragile beam of civilization in a world that is anything but civilized. We are going home, back to the world of clocks and calendars and certainties. But behind us, the mountain still stands, a silent giant that knows exactly where the boy in the blue jacket went. And why? The mystery of the missing 411 is a puzzle with no edges, a story with no end. It is a reminder that the world is much larger and much stranger than we dare to admit. And as we drive away from the shadows of the Roosevelt National Forest, we can only hope that the next time the mountain calls, it is not calling for us. Stay in the light, and never look back at the trees. Good night, and may your journey through the wilderness always bring you home. The canyon is dark, the wind is cold, and the story of Jaryd Atadero is now part of the silence. Listen to the wind. It is the only witness we have left. And even the wind, it seems, has been sworn to secrecy. The silence is total. The mystery remains. The fold is waiting. Stay on the path. Always stay on the path. Good night.